Feel like you're blind to what's happening in your operation? Well, Surgair is here to give you the visibility you need to get your operation under control. Their singular focus is building AI-powered, frictionless supply chains that give you real-time, end-to-end visibility. Surgair utilizes IoT solutions with their SaaS platform, Interius. That gives you 99.9% data accuracy and better control of your operations. Get the visibility you need at surgair.com. That's SURGERE.com, and find them at Manifest in booth 527. Visibility, control, results, Surgair.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, I am going to be joined by Nick Saunders, who is the CEO and co-founder at Hummingbird Systems. And Hummingbird Systems recently caught my attention because they're doing something very unique in the warehouse. And you know, I love those unique and innovative solutions in the warehouse themselves. And we're going to learn about what Hummingbird Systems is doing and a little bit about Nick's background too, and the challenge that he saw in the market and how Hummingbird Systems is addressing that. And they're utilizing drones to do something different than I think we've seen drones do in the warehouse already. So very interested to dive in here, and I won't give it away because I'll let Nick talk about this. But Nick, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Definitely happy to get you on. Excited to talk about what you're doing with Hummingbird and what that's all about. But I guess before we fully dive into that, let's get an understanding a little bit of your background, because you've been deep in the logistics industry, we could say, for quite some time. So tell us a little bit about your background and your experience in the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. So previous to kind of getting specifically into the industry, I founded an apparel and accessories company, a multi-channel company. So, got my first taste of kind of the online warehousing and fulfillment portion of kind of the industry. And so I had an understanding from the customer side coming in. And in 2008, I joined a startup 3PL called Quiet Logistics as one of the founding team members very early on before we'd shipped a unit. And at that time, our differentiator, if you will, we started that up in Massachusetts, which is kind of a unique location for starting a distribution fulfillment company. So, we started that company with the differentiator of utilizing robotics to give our customer service a lift and our end customers a higher level of service. And at that time, we utilized Kiva Systems, which was obviously the precursor to Amazon Robotics. Amazon came along and acquired Kiva Systems several years into that journey. But it was a great crucible of learning in terms of, first, I started on the sales side. And as we kind of started to really explode, one of our early customers was the Gilt Group, which was a unicorn status, and also presented an incredibly unique and complex supply chain problem for fulfillment. The flash sale model, secondary goods coming in, many of them unlabeled, and also on a time sale that had to be, captured, received, labeled, put away, picked, packed, and shipped out the door. So, it created kind of a fantastic ground level learning experience to kind of begin to understand all facets of what it means to be delivering a high level of service to customers in the direct to consumer space. with Quiet, I cycled in as we exploded in growth, and I built out the customer success team, which was a considerable differentiator for us in the marketplace. I think, heretofore it was a little bit more challenging for brands and retailers to get kind of a high level of customer service. We were also focused on very high average order value brands and goods. And, we were delivering an experience that was non-commoditized and very high level comparatively to a lot of our competitors at the time. So, using the robotics and kind of that was a significant differentiator. I also ran kind of all the customer integration systems wide and oversaw that. And, we started to scale. I ultimately signed, quite a raft of the who's who of kind of digitally native brands, including Away Travel before they shipped a unit, Mack Weldon, Bold and Break, Bonobos, and, ultimately was part of the team that brought Dara in as well, or Inditex, the most profitable apparel and accessories company in the world. And, so as we started to scale and grow, we were really kind of, cooking with gas, as it were, with the Kiva systems. And, we invested in a large install, and then Amazon came along, bought Kiva, and, hey, great pat on the back, reaffirming kind of, hey, you chose the good solution, because we're the only 3PL in the United States using, Kiva systems at that time. But obviously a kick in the gut, we knew Amazon wasn't buying it out of the holistic good of the industry, and that was going to go away. They were ostensibly buying it for its IP. And, we had our service and maintenance agreements for a period of time, but we realized that was going to go away. And so we kind of looked around. My co-founder and Hummingbird Bruce did a lap around the globe looking for a kind of commensurate automated solution to give us the lift that we needed, and didn't find it. And so, we did something quite interesting and quite unique, I think, for as it were, for most 3PLs. We actually decided to incubate our own robotic solution within Quiet Logistics. And that was based on, the fact that, hey, who understands the problem better than operators, right? We know what the real world use case is on the ground in the warehouse, what the complexities are, what the challenges are. And we knew what the strengths and weaknesses were with Kiva, / Amazon. Fantastic system. Once it's installed, it's expensive, but at the same time, it's not super flexible or scalable based on, the vagaries and the massive changes in peak and sale surge periods that you require when you're operating a 3PL for the types of brands that were super fast growing that we were servicing. So, understanding kind of those strengths and weaknesses, we conceived of, designed, and incubated Locus Robotics to address the problem head on. And, I think part of Locus's success is a testament to really kind of coming at it from the problem up, right? We weren't looking to develop a robotic solution and then trying to find, where do we apply this solution and how do we generate revenue from this solution. We really intimately understood the problem that we were solving for. And so I think that's been Locus's kind of, magic dust in terms of becoming an industry leader and, $1 billion plus company and the market leader both here in the US and in Europe in terms of autonomous mobile robots. So eventually it obviously made more sense to split Locus off as a separate company. I ended up, a lot of our team ended up going with Locus to scale that company. I ended up staying with Quiet Logistics and, kind of concluding the journey there, growing it, selling it twice, once to the related companies out of New York, Stephen Ross's company. And then the second time we sold it to American Eagle Group here in Pittsburgh, ironically enough. So, my journey kind of ended there, and myself and my partner in this endeavor, Bruce Welty, we're always curious about kind of finding better ways to doing things in the four walls of the warehouse, and also looking to address kind of the major pain points and the major cost centers, and how can we do that better? And, picking became kind of the obvious focus. And so we understood that the biggest challenges around picking are the complexity, the cost of, pick armatures, and, how realistically are you going to deploy these into the floors of warehouses, and at what cost, and what compromises, and what additional complexity to the workflows that you're adding. And, we didn't see anything out there. So we knew kind of the holy grail was solving kind of the discrete item pick aspect and doing it at a low cost. And so, that's how we began this endeavor. And that brings me to today with Hummingbird. And, I can get into that more as well, obviously.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, obviously, a well-established experience in the industry. I'll say, both like Quiet and Locust being, I would say, game changers in our industry for sure. And definitely, I'll give a shout out to Bruce as our first podcast guest ever as well.
Absolutely.
But, it's great to hear kind of that experience. And I think, you touched on something there, which I think is really important. When you mentioned, the success of Locust coming out of a problem set that you had in your own operation, essentially, right? So, and I think that, Locust, you mentioned kind of a look at picking there, and that's, kind of how things came about, and you're focused on picking now with Hummingbird Systems again. So tell us a little bit about, the problem really that you saw from the operations perspective that led to the founding now of Hummingbird Systems. And I guess tell us a little bit too about, what Hummingbird Systems is as well.
We'll be back after a quick break.
Where do supply chain solutions come together? At ProMat 2025 in Chicago. With over 1,100 of the world's leading manufacturing and supply chain solution providers under one roof, ProMat 2025 puts you face to face with the people, technologies, and game-changing ideas that are shaping this industry's future. From seeing the latest in our industry to learning from some of the brightest in our industry, there is something for everyone at ProMat. Will we see you in Chicago, March 17th to the 20th? Learn more at promatshow.com. And be sure to check us, the new warehouse, out at booth E10643. That's E10643.
Yeah, you bet. So, there's when it comes to robotics and warehousing, there is kind of that hype factor, right? And, I think that both Bruce and I were skeptical of kind of a lot of the solutions that kind of were presenting themselves in the real world. And, realizing that in time you'll get there. You look at like the humanoid aspect that's going on right now.
Right.
Eventually we'll get there. And I can speak to more of that in terms of whether I think that's the ideal form factor to solve kind of moving product through a warehouse or not. But so, this in the smart robot space and kind of the aisle picking space, collaborative aisle picking of automation, we see kind of two gaps to attack, or two cost centers. Two of the largest cost centers in running a warehouse are what? Labor and real estate.
Yeah.
And on the labor side, this is becoming a reality pre-COVID. It's only accelerated, as we all know, in terms of, people just don't really want to do these jobs anymore in this country. It's a challenging work environment. The pickers are running around, all day long, and it's exhausting, and it wears on them. And beyond that, the availability of the labor is a massive challenge. And then even when you add in the realities of the peak and sales surge period, where you're having to scale up and pay very high labor wages, especially in kind of distribution areas where lots of warehouses are competing for this type of labor, it becomes even more challenging. And then the quality of this type of labor has been declining steadily as well. So you spend all this investment in teaching training someone, getting them up to speed, and then, they're not doing the job at the level that you need. And it's such a low margin business, running a fulfillment facility. Like every touch, every movement, every minute, every second matters in terms of maintaining a margin. And, obviously with the kind of the types of companies that I'm used to working for, they deliver free shipping. They have lots of costs up the supply chain from us. And so, if they're going to squeeze costs, they squeeze them down to the warehouse. So, that factor in terms of human labor, addressing that cost. And then on the kind of the vertical side, there's so much unused vertical space within the four walls of a warehouse. Most operators in brown space environments have invested quite a lot of money in the infrastructure for their racking. But at the same time, you start to put units higher, then it's going to take more time, cost you more money, and erode your margins on what you're looking to execute. And so, looking at those two big buckets was kind of what we were looking to solve for. And create a low-cost aisle picking solution that's accessible, that's accessible to everyone, not just kind of the large organizations who are willing to spend a ton of money on infrastructure for an ASRS system or something like that. That's going to give their operation a lift and truly address the problem at work without kind of disrupting their workflows or requiring a huge infrastructure investment. And so that was the jumping off point for kind of how we approached it. And, circling back to what I described before, obviously the holy grail is kind of how are you going to pick these discrete units, right? There are solutions for moving cartons around in an automated fashion. Sure, even those can be exorbitant. And there's not a kind of a full adoption in terms of, universally doing that in a warehouse. But we saw the need to kind of solve that. We came up with a way to solve the picking problem, but at a higher level, and jumping back for a second, the idea was utilizing drones, because drones, on the kind of picking aspect, can simulate the 6 degrees of freedom of a human wrist, right? With roll, pitch, and yaw. So you can articulate and be precise in terms where you're trying to pick something, right? And the added benefit is that you're unlocking all that vertical storage space that now can become a fast-moving pick location that you otherwise were underutilizing. I mean, you're already paying for the square footage that the racking is sitting on, right? But if you're only picking up to 8 feet or with a step ladder or whatever it is, you're not driving as much revenue through square footage you're already paying for. So drones, originally the idea was to take kind of an extending arm, very simple solution that reached up from a ground-based AMR. But then, it became apparent with kind of the progress in drone technology over the last decade, and specifically over the last, 4 to 5 years, obviously in the Ukraine and elsewhere, military usages, et cetera, the opportunity to, utilize drones and utilize kind of their abilities as they keep progressing at this rapid pace became apparent. And so, at that point came up with the idea, hey, let's mount this pick solution that we've come up with on a drone, remove the human picker from the process. So, you're getting rid of that labor completely on that workflow. And now, we'll be allowing our customers to really fully utilize the square footage that they're already paying for and drive more revenue through that square footage. In terms of drones applications within warehouses, it was curious. I did a lot of research. We started this company in 2022, but I was working on it, late 21, kind of in terms of the research. And obviously, there's a plethora of inventory drone companies out there that are being utilized indoors, and they're doing great stuff. But at the same time, as an operator, and I might be biased in this perspective, to me, that's a feature, not a business, right? For operators like us, the inventory, you have to maintain inventory, but you should be doing that by cycle counting. And, there are ways to do that. And it's very low on the kind of totem pole of the value chain and the cost centers within, operating a facility. Now, obviously, if you're IKEA, it makes a ton of sense because, someone spends 7.5 hours walking through an IKEA, which we all have. And then you get to the pickup area and they said they had one item, your Malmo shelf or whatever it is.
It's not there.
And you get there and it's not there. So, there are definitely really great applications, I think, for drones in the inventory space, but it doesn't really address what we're looking to address when you've got a bin box that has 40 discrete units in it, right?
Right.
40 discrete t-shirts or whatever it may be. And so, we just conceived of and came up with this way to pick, which is unique and proprietary, and to do it efficiently and at a very low cost and keep it simple, because that's kind of also the tenet that I tell all my engineers. At the end of the day, I'm not as concerned about what the solution ultimately looks like as long as it works, as long as it's durable, as long as it's collaborative, and as long as it doesn't disrupt the existing workflows within operators' real world environments.
Mm. Very interesting there. And I think that it's super interesting that you chose the form factor and the application to be a drone in a sense. And when I first saw the video of it a couple weeks back, I think on LinkedIn somewhere, it caught my attention because that's exactly what I thought. What you just said was like, oh, I've only really seen drones in the warehouse being utilized for inventory management, right? And now this is like a totally different way to look at it and leverage it, which I think is really interesting. But I do want to ask you, because I do have maybe a little insider info that someone told me in the past, in that I know at Quiet, and I don't know if this was during your time there or what, but I know at Quiet, you guys were leveraging, and maybe they're still leveraging, a product called Palette Pick Slots, right? Which is, what they are? Yeah.
Yeah.
And they told me one time that they specifically made these higher units for Quiet. So I guess I'm curious, were you involved in that? And, has this always been kind of, I guess, an itch to, create higher picking bins, and how do we make them accessible, that you've been trying to scratch now for for a while, in a sense?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an itch that I've been trying to scratch for a long time. I was not there when, okay, yeah, all right, that was well known in LA. But I mean, operate in that environment when you've got this massive influx of product coming in for peak and sales surge period, and it can make or break your season in terms of putting this product in a way that's accessible and doesn't kill your operation when when it's, like, for example, when we had Zara as a client, like, we would go from the Thursday night before Black Friday, their sale would kick in, and the next morning, we've had like 1.2 million units that needed to go out of that one facility. Yeah, it was like, so, when you're dealing with kind of the realities of what that looks like, you're always trying to find a better way to put away product, pick product more efficiently. And I mean, obviously, automation is where we're going. We've still got some ways to go, but I do think kind of in that kind of smart robot space, collaborative in aisle, I think it's been proven out, obviously, by some of the names we've already talked about, including Locus. But there's still a long way to go. I mean, the penetration is minimal comparatively. And the reality is the human being will be taken out of that task ultimately. And so it's finding, in my perspective, because I am so intimately kind of familiar with operating warehouses and the challenges, it's a way, for me, it's about finding a solution that works, that's low cost, and that's going to work with other existing systems and workflows you have in place. And so, that was the wellspring, and kind of continues to be the goal today here at Hummingbird.
Yeah. And I think that's great. And I think it's, you have great points all around about, the automation itself. I mean, I think it's inevitable, and certainly we see a ton of stuff about automation everywhere, right? But like you said, I mean, the penetration is still fairly low, despite all the marketing that is everywhere in our face, making it seem like, every warehouse I drive past must be automated. They must have robots in there, but there's still a long way to go. And I think a lot of new solutions still to be created and proven out as we go along there. So tell us a little bit about, the solution itself and how it works, because, it's a drone, right? But it's a tethered drone. So tell us a little bit about, why tethered and how that works, because I think, a lot of we were talking about the drones that are doing inventory counting, and they're kind of free flying in a sense, but this is tethered. So tell us a little bit about that, and tell us a little bit about, the apparatus on the drone that actually makes the pick itself.
Yeah, you bet. So, originally, kind of when I started this endeavor, I was still in New England, and, my first kind of concept here is like, what are the showstoppers of a solution like this? Will it fly? Will it pick? Can it deliver a product? Can the drones fly, within the workspace safely and not collide, multi-agent collision avoidance, things like that? And so when I began, I found a great, very talented software engineering team and drone experts in Hungary, believe it or not. And my first two goals were, here, proof of concept one, can a drone take off autonomously, fly, and pick an item out of a bin box. And then proof of concept 2, can multi-agent drones free flying to locations within an aisle, fly, pick, and deliver the item to a drop point. And, we were very successful in doing that with the free flying drones, and free flying drones will still be part of our solution. But ultimately, the realization is drones have come a long way, but, you're still dealing with battery technology, and the battery technology for flight on time task is limited comparatively. The best you're going to get when you're lifting items and moving around is maybe 20 minutes. And then you either have to recharge at a docking station with a hot battery swap, or you have to just replace that in line with another drone that's flying in while it's doing that. So, and then you're dealing with a multi-agent, collision free flying as well. So it became apparent that, and we had always conceived of kind of a heterogeneous system with kind of a tether and some drones free flying. Like the free flying drones can do inventory counting. That's one thing that's an important differentiator. We'll be able to do inventory as the value add because we already have the cameras and the ability to do it. But more importantly, we'll be able to lift discrete items and cycle count, move them into another bin, count them into another bin ultimately. So, we've got that benefit. Yeah. And also we'll be able to, the free flying drone will be able to do single line, single unit return put away, which, as we know, is a very painful aspect of processing returns. You can't do bulk put away if you're running a single SKU location operation, and even on the multi SKU, it's challenging. So, because you want to obviously marry it up with the same SKU for the most part. And so, with those realizations, we basically realized that, okay, we need the power to be continuous. We always thought we were going to go down that line. So we went to the tethered solution, and the tethered solution had a minimal blip on the infrastructure. We come in, we set up some steel framing, and then the cord runs down the length of the aisle. The drone can travel up and down on that pick face. And also right now it's on one side of the pick face, but eventually it'll be picking on both sides of the pick face. And that could be, a 30 feet long run, or it could be, 200 foot long run. And how many drones you want in those spaces is up to you based on your your pick frequency, your pick profile, et cetera. But so really what happens when you tether the drone, you now have, full-time on task picking. You could go an 8-hour shift straight, just picking uninterrupted. The other beauty is that the pick itself, the tether itself, and the trolley system on the wire is spring loaded. So now you're offsetting anywhere from 7 to 10 pounds of the actual drone and whatever it's carrying. So you're getting a benefit there.
Oh, okay.
That kind of, gives you that lift, and you're kind of eliminating a lot of the complexity in terms of multi-agent collision avoidance. You can imagine these drones, which kind of are just under kind of a meter square, are flying down multiple aisles, and we're working on that too, and we'll get there eventually. But again, going back to the kind of tenet of, developing a system that's practical, modular, and works, and it's bulletproof in a warehouse environment, which is a tough working environment. So the tether kind of addresses all three of those things immediately and allows us to really kind of, attack the problem head on and not have to be concerned about battery charging and this and that. And in terms of kind of, our installation and implementation, it's still going to be less than, let's say, a Locust or Fixer or Staccato, whatever.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the rationale and the reasoning behind the tether. And then since we moved to that, it's exceeded our expectations in terms of success, because the most important thing is, does it work? And, so far we're in a pilot program in Columbus, Ohio, and it's been working great. And in terms of the actual pick apparatus, again, the idea of it being modular is important to us, dependent on the form factor. That's part of the challenges of, as we know, the robotic arms and picking solutions, very complex and expensive, but ours is very, very simple. So we do have the kind of traditional suction picking apparatus on the end. We can pick pneumatically, but kind of our bread and butter and our foundational, I think, differentiator is this magnetic end effector. So we have a neodymium permanent magnet on the end of the pick arm and end effector. And what we do is we apply a tag to the product that has ferrous material embedded in it.
Mm.
Now, right now, it's just a tag that has ferrous material embedded in it that allows the magnet to affix, and the bond is incredibly strong. And, the drone to lift the item and carry it out and then drop it. We have a peeler mechanism which pulls back the arm and just peels the item off. And right now, in terms of those ferrous labels, they're just ferrous labels, but those are barcodes. Those could be, barcodes. You could even nest RFID in it if you wanted. So they're just labels that get affixed on the product. And right now, in the pilot phase program, we're putting those on as the product arrives, which is not, it's not unusual in workflows to have to affix another label on items. I mean, most people, that's not ideal, but it happens all the time. But at the end of the day, once we prove the ROI, which is significant, it's, 4.5 months, and that will be pushed back up to the packaging and manufacturing, and the label will be applied there. And again, it can be an integrated barcode label. And the magnetic system is remarkable. In our very first pilot deployment, we had over 85% pick rate success of kind of, getting to the location with the drone, reaching in, the arm extends into the bin. It kind of micro positions. We have a fluorescent light that also kind of helps micro position the end magnet. And then there is the attraction, and it binds, and then lifting it out and taking it for wherever you're going to go in terms of dropping. So, it's a very kind of unique, simple system that, it's robust and it works extremely well. So, that's kind of, once we solved how to do that at a very low cost and make that accessible to anyone operating a warehouse that's a brownfield environment, that not going to have to spend millions of dollars to, maybe put in an ASRS system, but they still want, automation. They're having trouble finding kind of labor in their area, or the costs are too exorbitant for it to make sense. So, I think we're really onto something there. And so far, so good. We have interest in other pilot programs from other companies as well. GXO has reached out to us for a pilot program, and we have a few others potentially lined up for this year. And we're going to follow the same playbook that we did at Locus,
Yeah.
It's just basically, you get it in a warehouse. You want your engineers on the floor in the warehouse, because you don't want 3 people, interpreting the question and the answer back to the engineer. You want to be able to walk to the picker and say, hey, how do you handle this situation or this exception in the real world? And then you build the solution from there. And I feel like, that's what we've done a good job in doing, and coming at it from the actual problem we're solving for. And so far, so good.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's a very interesting approach to picking. Definitely very different from, I think, most of anything I've seen before on the market. And I think, and I love the approach there too that you just mentioned of, go to the picker and ask them, like, well, what would you actually do in this situation? And then how do we, work around that and figure that out and add that to the solution itself. So very interesting there too on the tethering, because, obviously I was thinking like, okay, well, this must be from a power perspective, but it sounds like additionally that allows you to increase the payload essentially that you can spur on the drones. Right. So tell us a little bit about that. I mean, how much weight can one of these drones actually handle?
Yeah. So, the target weight is 5 pounds and under. 5 pounds and under, if you look at kind of the reality of what's arriving on your doorstep as an e-commerce consumer, not 85 to 90% of everything that arrives at your doorstep weighs under 5 pounds, including the outer packaging and any kind of fill that might be in there or anything else. So, we've got a wide swath of opportunity in terms of the categories that we can address. We're starting off with apparel and accessories and nutraceuticals. And the great thing about the magnetic pick solution is the form factor isn't as relevant. It works regardless, as long as the label is there. So that, I think, is advantageous comparatively to other solutions that are out there, even other solutions that, say they can pick everything. Some of them are shuttling it to a human being who's then moving it from one bin to another in some cases. So I think that's a significant advantage.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's interesting too about the magnetic approach there because, I was looking at it thinking like, oh, is this some kind of suction or something, which can be limiting at times. You look at kind of the development of robotic arms in for warehouse application, and certainly that's been a limiting factor, right? Is the gripper, and can we grip something that's softer, and how do we do that properly? So I think that's really interesting to hear that you're utilizing that as the application to make that grab. So what's I mean, if you bring in these drones, right, and I guess what's the picture of the ideal setup? I mean, is it you look down the aisle, and is it a hybrid of drones
Yeah.
doing some of the picking, humans still doing some of the picking, or is the idea that it'll be like fully drones just grabbing all of these items?
Yeah, I mean, I think it'll probably be like a step function, but it could be, both, obviously. So, right now, one of the other kind of foundational aspects that I keep in mind is as we kind of develop this system is it needs to be collaborative, right? It needs to be able to kind of dovetail into a facility. And I mean, the last thing any operator wants is to add another system and integrate it and then, have it kind of as a separate track and management, plant management kind of aspect in their operation. So, we're designing it so it works collaboratively, certainly with AMRs. I mean, I think in an ideal world, and we're also, as you saw in that video, probably, we have our own AMR too.
Yeah.
And we could be a standalone solution and deliver that, or we could work collaboratively with existing AMR solutions within the warehouse. So now, in that world, you look down the aisle and the drones are traveling on the tether and they're picking, and AMRs are showing up, and the drones are dropping the product into the AMR, and the AMR is going off to the pack section, and the drone's on to its next pick. The beauty of that is, when you calculate your real units per hour picking, when you're talking about AMRs and ground bots, there's a lot of time slicing going on, right? So you have to cut, it's a little bit ephemeral, to be honest, because there's a lot of dwell time. These bots are sitting there waiting for a human to get to them to actually do the pick. And a lot of times they're not including that time in the actual kind of pick rate that they advertise. And the beauty of our system is, a drone can pre-pick a unit as the bot is traveling to the location, and bang, drop it in right when it arrives, and it's gone. So, there's some great efficiency to that system in our mind. But at the end of the day, the way we conceive it is initially the system will be working, independently with no human beings there in the early days. Obviously replan put away can be done on another shift, or, when that occurs. And then the bots would be picking, dropping into an AMR. But, if you're not utilizing AMRs, the drone would travel to the end of the aisle and deposit in a tote, a gaylord, whatever repository you need to do that, and then transport to packing. But, the real kind of, I think, beauty of the solution, and especially kind of completing that 360-degree service offering that some of these kind of AMR companies or ourselves could do is, you eliminate the human from the picking and you eliminate the human from the transport, right? Because really that's all AMRs are, just a highly intelligent, conveyance system. And we could really, really kind of, I think, give operations a very significant lift in terms of their efficiencies. And then you add in the fact that you're obviously driving more revenue through space you're already paying for.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's super interesting to hear how you're approaching this problem set. And the application itself is certainly, as I said before, very different from, I think, any other application we've kind of seen to tackle picking in a sense. And it'd be very interesting to see how this continues to develop and evolves over time. But really, really interesting, and I love that it's coming from problems that you were facing as an operator yourself. And I think that really holds a strong foundation into what it can be. And I'm sure you're going around applying it in the right way, which I think makes a lot of sense. Absolutely. So really appreciate you coming on and talking to us about Hummingbird Systems and what you're doing. But before we close out here, I do have to, because you mentioned this a little bit earlier on in the conversation, I do have to get your thoughts on humanoids in the warehouse and what you think there.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I think at a kind of high level is it's inevitable.
Okay.
What I think kind of as an operator and from that perspective, I just don't think it's the most ideal form. If you're going to design a system to transport discrete units or cartons, in a warehouse, is the human form the best way to do that, right? Or human body kind of concept. And I don't think it is, but at the same time, if they can build them cost effectively, and, certainly many of the aspects of our world are designed for, the form factor that is the human being to use. So I think that, I think it's inevitable. I think it's happening. I think our system can work collaboratively with humanoids. We were speaking to an NVIDIA sales rep, and they were like, "Oh, you should talk to our investment group, but make sure you say it's going to work with humanoids." I'm like, "Yeah, of course. If it works with humans, it's going to work with humanoids, right?" So, yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting and inevitable, but I wonder if it's, the most ideal kind of design solution for the problem that they're addressing.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. I was curious your thoughts there because you mentioned it earlier. So I was like, oh, I gotta see what this guy's thinking. Yeah. All right. Sounds very good. So Nick, I really appreciate you coming on the show, and definitely looking forward to seeing what the future of Hummingbird Systems looks like, and see those drones flying around the warehouse picking those goods. So if people are interested in learning more about Hummingbird Systems, what's the best way to do that?
Just reach out directly to me. My email is nsaunders@hbird.tech, or LinkedIn as well. And I'm happy to share more. We're entertaining different paths to growth. We're still we're not commercial yet, but I think we'll be commercial in the next year at scale. We're going to keep adding pilot programs. So just reach out directly to me. I'd be happy to talk to anyone, whether it's a, collaborative joint venture type of thing, or whether it's just getting our system into a facility and trying it out.
All right. Awesome. And we'll definitely put all that information in the show notes, as well as at thenewwarehouse.com as well, so people can easily find it. And we will also link to a video of the system in action at thenewwarehouse.com as well. So be sure to check that out. So Nick, thank you once again for your time on the show today.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Enjoyed this episode? Make sure you are subscribed to the podcast, and for more content from the New Warehouse, find us on LinkedIn and YouTube. Links to subscribe can be found in the show notes, and for everything The New Warehouse, head to thenewwarehouse.com.